can a narcissist truly forget their behavior? Like the mean, awful things that they've done to you, do they actually forget it? Like, is that actually something that happens? Like, have you ever wondered if a narcissist genuinely forgets or just like erases their mind out of their memory, like their abusive actions, or like do they have the capacity and the capability to ignore or even dismiss the harm that they've caused toward you? So often times in a narcissistic relationship where you're with someone and they're like, yeah, I don't remember that. Yeah, that didn't happen. And it starts to make you doubt and like wonder, like maybe they just have memory problems. Maybe they're just struggling with this certain aspect of it. Like, and you start to wonder, do they actually know? Are they actually erasing the memory? Like, what is actually going on? If you guys are new here, my name's Ben Taylor. I'm a narcissist that's on this channel to try to help people understand about narcissism, what's actually going on underneath the surface in the mind. If you like what you see, hit subscribe, like, rate, or review if you're listening on the podcast. Would love to have you a part of the community and help you move forward. If you want us to take the next step in moving forward, go to escapetoxicity.com and check out some of the resources we've provided to help you stepping out of a toxic relationship, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. So in this video, we're going to explore just some of the concepts of like memory suppression and how it relates to narcissistic behavior, what that actually looks like. Is there actually memory loss? What is actually going on there? And we're going to discuss some of the reasons why a narcissist might forget their abusive actions and what it means for you. All right, so jumping right in, like memory suppression as a defense mechanism. Like I want you to consider the concept of like, what if the mind is suppressing something to be able to avoid actually that piece of accountability or that piece of uncomfortability, okay? Now, we do find this a lot with survivors, okay? With survivors that they're struggling to remember things. They're struggling to be able to process things at different times because of memory suppression. Now, typically what's happening is they're struggling to remember the bad times. And so you're with a narcissist and you think everything in the past has been amazing with the narcissist and you remember all the good times. But what you don't remember is like how he belittled you before the date or how he yelled at you and screamed at you in the car. Like there's all these things that kind of like disappear. And you're like, wait a second, like the trauma, like I don't really remember it being that bad. Like some of it is hidden and some of it's suppressed automatically. Our bodies do that just as a whole, just with trauma, just with hard experiences. This is why we have practices like EMDR, EMI, different things to be able to help you actually like engage and heal parts of you that maybe you can't even access or that you're not even sure how to even get to this, what's actually underneath the surface. So narcissism uses sometimes memory suppression as a way to protect like their self-image and avoid the feelings of shame and guilt. And so with this, it's not like, okay, like I'm going to hide it or I'm going to erase it. It's like suppressing what actually might be there in order to protect like who they believe they are. Okay, not who they are, but who they believe they are, who they want to be able to project who they are. So it talks about like the self-image, and like the self-image piece is like the mask that I'm putting out there. So like there's me, like there's this version of the toxic person, and then there's the mask that I'm giving out to the rest of society, the one that looks good, the one that sounds good, the one that, you know, is loving and is kind and all this stuff. And that's what he does. He switches it around and puts a mask out there for everybody to see versus like what's actually underneath. And then there's this aspect of like, okay, now you're bringing up a topic or something is happening that I don't want to remember because that memory actually triggers a piece of shame. That memory actually triggers something that's actually holding me back or making me feel bad about myself. Now you have to remember like the majority of stuff that we talk about in the circle of narcissistic abuse is all about themselves. Is all about like them putting stuff back on like other people so they don't have to avoid what's actually going on like underneath the surface. Okay, so a narcissist sometimes will intentionally like forget about something or intentionally deny the things they're doing just to be able to avoid confronting the truth about themselves. Like they're running from the truth. As a narcissist, I was always running from the truth of the situation. I did that. I hurt that person. I cheated. I lied. I gaslit. Like that didn't happen. I didn't want to acknowledge the stuff that I was doing. All I was acknowledging was the pain or the aftermath that actually happened. And I didn't want to admit that was me, so I'd have to explain it away. Well, I'm a victim. Well, they're attacking me. All these different things to be able to twist it around to make myself look and feel better. And so you might have times where you're talking to your narcissist and you're like, I can't believe you did that. And he's like, I didn't do that. Like, what are you talking about? Okay, and he starts to gaslight you about the reality that you remember and the reality that you believe. They might like forget different instances of like physical violence or like high emotional abuse to avoid being responsible for the actions that are actually happening. So you're trying to hold them accountable to something and they're just like, that never happened. Now, I do think there's pieces of not just memory suppression, but also memory gaps that can happen over a period of time. But I do think it's over an elongated period of time with the narcissist being very toxic in their truthfulness and in what they're actually saying on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so like think of it with this concept. It's like, imagine you're like lying to 30 different people every single day for 30 years. Like you get to the place where you start to like forget of like what story is actually true, like which version am I giving to a different person, which mask am I putting up for a different person. So I feel like there's times that there is like these slips or there is these like blanks in memory, but I don't say that to give like a pass, because any type of memory loss in one sense is still not reason to do what they're doing. Okay, to do what I was doing and I didn't remember it magically, it really wasn't true the majority of the time. Okay, so a lot of times a narcissist is trying to deal with the incongruence of like who they are versus the mask that they're actually putting out there. Okay, so like this idea of like, this is who I am, this is who I'm like projecting myself to be, and I don't want to look bad. I don't want to have the shame of like anything underneath, so I have to keep that image. Okay, so as a result, like I have to be able to put down, suppress like the forgetful behaviors, like the things that happen, the abusive behaviors there, and be like, okay, that didn't really happen. Okay, so sometimes we hear like this aspect of like narcissists that like gaslight themselves. And part of this is almost like a tactic to be able to be like, if I do this, then I'll feel better about myself. So like, I hurt this person, but that's okay because they deserved it, because they didn't do something for me. Like there's a way to be able to twist it so that as a narcissist, like I feel better about the situation. So it's like trying to reduce like the discomfort that I'm feeling, trying to reduce the shame or the guilt that's like popping up, and like, what do I have to do to avoid that? What do I have to do to get away from it? Well, I got to change the story that actually just happened. Oftentimes we talk about this in the term of rewriting, which is very similar to what we do in helping people heal, which is rewiring. So give you kind of an idea, rewriting is when a narcissist is looking at their own past and they see the truth and they don't want to believe it. They don't want to deal with it. So instead of believing the truth or working through the truth, they actually change the truth to be something false. So I'm rewriting a past instance from something that was true, and I'm changing it to be false so that I feel better about myself. I didn't actually hurt that person. I actually like stood up for myself because they were attacking me. False. But it makes me feel better because now I'm the victim and now I'm not the abuser. Okay? And then what we do with Raw Motivations is trying to help people is we actually help them rewire. Rewire is the opposite. So it's talking to survivor and being like, hey, you know this thing that they told you, you know this thing that you've been believing for a while that's false or a limiting belief. Let's rewire it back to the truth. Let's actually be able to change that thought in your mind so you're no longer stuck in a fantasy and a fiction and a false reality, because a lot of times you're stuck in the fog where you don't know what to do. Or you're stuck in limbo land being like, I don't know if I should leave him or if I should stay with him. I don't know if he's a narcissist or if he's not. I don't actually know who I am or what direction I need to go. All these things happen a lot of times when you're with a toxic person. Okay, so with this aspect, like a narcissist oftentimes will forget different things in order to keep their image better to themselves, in order to minimize like the discomfort of having to deal with the shame, having to deal with the guilt. Like I mentioned, like a lot of times you'll see a narcissist that will gaslight you to make themselves feel better. That didn't happen. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you must have something wrong with your eyesight because that you definitely didn't see that. That's not something I did. Like, this is the aspect where they deny. So sometimes they'll use Darvo, where they deny and they flip it around where they're the victim. Okay, by denying or erasing their abusive behavior, they make it challenging for you to be able to figure out it is your own judgment. Like, is your own judgment tainted? Is your own memory tainted? And you start to wonder and be like, I don't know what's actually like true. Another aspect that I wanted to highlight really quick is this aspect of compartmentalizing. And a lot of times the narcissist will compartmentalize to be able to avoid actually dealing with that. So I would do that growing up, and I didn't know what I was doing. I viewed it as kind of like boxes. I viewed my mind as have a bunch of different boxes with a bunch of different topics, a bunch of different people, a bunch of different thoughts. And when I need to process something or I need to work through something, I can go to that one box. So if I need to process being like sad, I can go to that one box, I can pull it up, I can open it, I can look at it, I can deal with all the feelings of being sad in that moment, I can take whatever extra sadness I have, I can put it in the box, I can shut it up, tape it all up, and shove it back in the resources in my mind. So when something happens, I no longer have to be sad. I've dealt with it. I'm done with it. Okay, so there's this concept that narcissists compartmentalize. Compartmentalize you, compartmentalize their actions, compartmentalize all different types of things to make themselves feel better about themselves and to avoid that accountability, to avoid that responsibility of what's actually going on inside their head. Now, some of this might be like confusing. Some of this might be like, feels like words out because it seems like we're going around and around. And ultimately, like the whole aspect here is narcissists oftentimes will forget things in order to make themselves like feel better. Okay. Sorry, there's like quotation marks if you listen on podcasts. Like forget, quote unquote. Okay. Like this aspect of like, well, I wasn't really abusive. And oftentimes that's just to feel better about themselves. Like, let me change it around so that I feel like I'm a good person. This is one of the 7 lies that I identified when I went through Wake Up Warrior. Is one of the lies that I had is I am a good person. I wanted to believe that, and I wanted to say that, and I wanted to think that, even though it wasn't true. Like, that's what I wanted to think, even though I knew I was still cheating on my wife. Even though I still knew I was lying and being abusive and gaslighting, all these things, but I didn't want to acknowledge it. I didn't want to admit it, so I had to tell myself a lie to believe something. I think it's like Adolf Hitler, it says like you tell a big enough lie long enough and people start to believe it. And so that's what I did. I started to believe that, hey, I'm a good person, even though I wasn't acting that way, even though I wasn't actually showing that. Okay, so narcissist typically doesn't truly forget, but what they actually do is they compartmentalize, they box it up, they gaslight themselves, they manipulate the incongruence of what's going on so they don't have to deal with being accountable. They don't have to deal with being responsible. So if you're with a toxic person today and they're not being honest, they're not being vulnerable, and they're not showing consistent change, you need to leave because they don't care about themselves. They don't care about you. They're not actually working on it. And that's the point you need to realize. If you don't have honesty, you don't have a foundation. You don't have anything to build a relationship on, and it's just doomed to failure. So move towards you, focusing on you. And if you want to take your healing to the next level, go to claritychallenge.net. We've got about 2 days left for you to be able to sign up for the challenge that's actually going on to help you get free. Help you actually take back like your power of who you actually are versus like how the narcissist stripped that away. Be able to find you, like what you like, your hobbies, your interests, your desires, be able to find you and walk you through that process in a systematic way to rewire your thought process from the false reality that the narcissist had you believe to back to the truth of what's actually real. So we provide like daily guidance inside the program and support for you as a survivor along with other survivors to work towards your healing, your growth, your change. I want to invite you. Go to claritychallenge.net today.